Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to look at how we can build a fault-tolerant WordPress site on AWS. We're going to use a whole bunch of different technologies. So here's a network diagram, what it's going to look like. Got our user here, they're going to be browsing to the internet, they're going to hit our Route 53 domain name. This is completely optional, you don't have to do it, you could just use our application load balancer. And then essentially they're going to go in and that's going to connect up to an Elastic load balancer in the cloud. We're then going to have some EC2 instances behind an auto-scaling group. They're going to be in separate availability zones. And we're then going to have some RDS instances. Again, this is going to be multi-AZ. We're going to have two S3 buckets. One's going to have our media assets for our WordPress site, and the other one's going to have our code for WordPress. And essentially, we're going to serve out all our pictures from our WordPress site through CloudFront. So we're going to be using a whole bunch of different AWS technologies. Once this has been built, we're going to go in and simulate a failure in our EC2 environment as well as in our RDS environment and see how that affects our site. So let's go and log into the AWS console. Okay, so here I am in the AWS Management Console. We're going to go over to S3. We're going to set up our S3 buckets first. Then I'm going to go ahead and create a bucket. I'm going to call this a Cloud Guru WordPress, and then my initials, and then the year, so 19, something like that. I'm going to do this in the Irish region. You can do this in USDC1. The reason I'm not using USDC1 right now is I'm having DNS issues within my default VPC. Not really sure what it is, but I'm just going to use the Irish region. I'm going to go ahead and just create this bucket. Oh, before I do this, so this is a Cloud Guru WordPress, and then I'm going to put in here what it's for. So this bucket is going to have our code, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy this into the clipboard and go ahead and hit create, and that has now created my bucket. Then I'm going to go in here and change this from code. I'm going to call it images, something like that. So this is where our media assets are. Maybe I'll just call it media. And there we go. I'm going to go ahead and hit create. So we've now got our two buckets that are in there. Our EC2 instances will be using this, as will CloudFront. Let's go over and create a CloudFront distribution because that does take some time. So we're going to go over to CloudFront in Network, Content and Delivery. And I'm going to go ahead. I've got my CloudFront distribution left over from another lab. It has been disabled, so I'm just going to quickly delete that as well. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and create a new distribution. So that has now been deleted. And I'm going to go and use a web distribution. The origin domain name. So what is this going to be doing? Well, this is going to be fronting our media bucket. So you want to click on the media one. The origin path we can leave as blank because we're not going to have any paths within it. Origin ID can be that. Restrict bucket access. I'm just going to leave that as no. HTTP and HTTPS. I'm basically going to leave everything as the default values. I'm going to scroll all the way down to my the very bottom. I'm going to go ahead and hit create distribution, and that has now created a distribution, and that's going to take some time. The other thing that will take some time is our RDS provisioning. So before we go to RDS, what we need to do is just go down to our network. So we need to go over to VPCs. And what we're going to do is just create some security groups. So we're going to create a web DMZ if you don't already have one. So let's go over to our security groups. And just to clean up, I'll just delete this one and my RDS Launch Wizards one so that we don't have them. So delete those security groups, and there we go. One of them has a dependent object, probably like an EC2 instance. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit cancel. So let's just look at web DMZ rather than deleting it. I'm going to go to my inbound rules. So I've allowed port 80 and port 22. Hopefully you've done that as well. With the RDS security group, in here we've got RDS, and you just need to make sure that you've got the MySQL port, so port 3306, open to your WebDMZ security groups. That's 2B8, and if I just click over here, I should be able to see it, so 2B8. If you haven't done that, it's very easy to do. All you need to do is go in and hit add rule, and then custom rule, and then scroll down until you find the MySQL Aurora port, and then in here just type SG, and you'll be able to see your security groups. Sometimes you can get a weird UI thing where it's like hidden. All you have to do is hit space, and then you'll be able to select it. So I'm going to open it up to my web DMZ, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save rules. And there we go. So now I've got my MySQL port, which is open up to my web DMZ security group. Next thing we need to do is go over and provision our RDS instance. So we're going to go over to databases. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and hit create database, and we're going to go and do this using the MySQL database. So click in here, and then we're going to go down and you just want to use the dev test template. We're going to leave MySQL at the latest version. The database names, we're just going to do a cloud guru for everything. So just copy and paste that into your clipboard. You're going to use it for the master username, the master password, and to confirm the master password. In here, let's go over to our burstable class and just do a T2 micro. We're just going to scroll down. We're just going to use general purpose storage. We will enable storage auto scaling, but we shouldn't really go over the 20 gigs. Depends how big your WordPress site gets, to be honest. In here, we are going to create a standby instance for multi-AZ. So we are definitely going to do that. Down here, we're going to deploy it into our default VPC. Make sure you click in here and do additional connectivity configuration. We don't want it publicly accessible, and we want to, instead of putting it to our default security group, we want to put it into our RDS launch wizard one, which we just previously opened up to our web DMZ. So go ahead and select that. And then we're going to go all the way down. In here, we've got our additional configuration. It's really important to click in here because you need to name your database. If you do not specify a database name, Amazon RDS will not create a database. And that means when you're provisioning your WordPress instance, it has no database to connect into. So let's just call the database a Cloud Guru. We're going to leave everything else as default. Monitoring, we probably don't want enhanced monitoring. So I'm just going to uncheck that. I'm going to leave everything else as default, and then I'm going to go ahead and create my database. So that is now creating our database. It will take a little bit of time to bring that up online. So that is now creating our RDS instance. We've created our two S3 buckets. We've changed our security groups. Let's go just over to Identity Access Management first of all. And you probably will already have a role that allows us to talk to S3. I'm just going to create a new one just so we can see how we do it. So we're going to need this role for our EC2 instances to speak to S3. If I just type in S3 in there, we can add the S3 full access. I'm going to go add my tags. I don't need any. And in here, I'm just going to call it S3 for WordPress. So this is the new role. And I'm going to go ahead and create this role. And that has now created the role. The very last thing we need to do is go over and provision our EC2 instance. So we're going to go in and launch our instance. We're going to use the Amazon Linux 2 AMI. And we're going to go ahead and hit next. And in here, we're going to leave everything as default, except we are going to change the role over to our S3 for WordPress. And then in here, we're going to paste in a Bootstrap script. So this is our WordPress script. Essentially what it's going to do is it's going to go in, it's going to install Apache, PHP, and MySQL. In fact, I'll also just make sure it does a yum update first. So yum update -yes. So it's going to update our OS. It's going to go in and install Apache, PHP, and MySQL. It's going to go to our var HTML directory. It's going to create a file for our health checks. So when we put our health checks on our Elastic Load Balancer, it's going to add it in, and it's just going to create a file called healthy.html. It's then going to go and get the latest version of WordPress. Essentially what it does here is it unzips it, it copies it across to the right directory, it then removes the install directory, it then removes the file that it downloaded, the zip file, in order to install it. We then do some permission changes, so WordPress will actually work in our directory. And then we're going to go and get what's called a HT access, and I'll explain that a bit later. And then we just rename it so that it's a hidden file. HT access will allow us to do our URL rewrite, so it will allow us to serve content out of CloudFront rather than doing it out of our S3 buckets. And then it's going to make sure that our Apache will start back up in case our EC2 instances restart. So that's all this script does. Let's copy it into our clipboard, and then just down here we can paste it in. And there we go. And next we're going to go ahead and add our storage, and I'm just going to use general purpose. Next, going to add our tags. I am going to give this a name. It's going to be name, and then my golden image, something like that. And then go ahead and configure our security groups, select an existing one, and then just using our web DMZ security group, that's where we're going to put it in. And then we're going to go ahead and hit review and launch. And we're going to go ahead and launch our EC2 instance and make sure you've got access to your key pair. So that is now launching. So it will take a while for everything to come back up. You're going to have to go over and check CloudFront to make sure that the distribution is ready to go. My one is now enabled, and you're also going to have to go over to RDS and make sure your RDS database is ready to go as well. Let's have a look at my one, whether or not it's ready. In here, we can see it's still modifying. So I need this to be active, and then I also need my EC2 instance to come up online. So I'm going to pause the video, or I'm going to end the video here. I'm going to wait for probably about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll go on and do some more clouding. So if you've got the time, please join me in the next lecture. Thank you.